Hello, and welcome to an incredibly in-depth recap of the first book in the Devil's Night series, Corrupt, by Penelope Douglas. I really wanted to do a recap of this book because it is absolutely just unhinged. The decisions that all of these people make are just terrible, but that makes for a really fun and drama-filled book. Just a disclaimer, I don't know who any of these people are, so if you're up here, I'm so sorry. These are people that when I search like character name fan cast on Pinterest, these people came up, except for Rika's mom, who is going to be portrayed by Glenn Close because she's not relevant enough to have her own fan cast. I'm so sorry. I would also like to let you guys know that although I did enjoy this book, I basically disagree with 100% of anyone's actions ever. But personally, I love a good drama-filled dark romance. And I love to read about it. I am so glad that this is not happening to me, but it's fun to read about. I also want to reiterate that this is a dark romance. So I would basically say that any trigger warning that could be trigger warned, I'm going to trigger warn for. All right, so let's get going. This book starts out with our main character, Rika, right there, our blonde girl. She is attending a farewell party for her family friend and ex-boyfriend, Trevor. There he is. So Rika and Trevor have been friends since they were born and basically have been pushed together by their parents for their entire lives. Because of this, Rika kind of calls their relationship inevitable. The two dated their entire freshman year of college until Rika ended things with him in May. So Rika comes to Trevor's party at the Christ's family home in Thunder Bay to break the news that she will not be returning to Brown for their sophomore year of college, where they both attended together. Rika felt stifled at Brown and she wanted to transfer to school where she knew Trevor would not follow her, and that is in Meridian City. Trevor hated being close to home and hated big cities, so that is exactly what Meridian City was. So Rika knew that he would never follow her there. She wants to finally know what it's like to be on her own without her parents and her family name and her best friend Noah, or Trevor to just pick her up if she falls. She's never really been completely on her own, without a safety net. And so she wants to go to college in Meridian City so that she can see how that goes. So when she goes to tell Trevor about her plans to transfer to Meridian City, the conversation quickly turns sour when he realizes that she is not going to be completely alone in Meridian City like she thinks she is, because Trevor's older brother, Michael, lives there, where he plays for their professional basketball team. So he will also be in the city. So Michael Christ, that guy with the hat, he is Trevor's elusive older brother who Rika has been infatuated with since she was a little girl, but he never gave her the time of day. He's 3 years older than Rika. But Rika and Michael barely ever speak or interact. With the population of Meridian City being about 2 million people, she doubts that she'll ever see him. Trevor doesn't let her off the hook, though, and insinuates that when she moves there, she will go looking for him. Trevor then apologizes and tells her how much he loves her and that they belong together, but Rika has never felt that way about him. She's never felt the way she feels about Michael, about Trevor. She's always had a crush on Michael and liked Michael and gravitated towards him, and she's never felt that way about Trevor. And you can tell that Trevor can kind of sense that. Trevor tries to get all up in Rika's business, and when he's I love you, when she continually pushes him away, he finally gives up and he tells her, quote, "Make new friends and leave everything here behind you all you want, but your demons will still follow you. There's no escaping them." And then he storms out. So after that heated exchange, Rika is just ready to go home and leave the Christ mansion. And as she starts navigating her way out of the house, she spots Michael. He's already staring at her when she spots him, staring her down. And his stare kind of freezes her in place because she's so surprised. So then he gets up from where he's sitting and he beelines right for her. And she's kind of frozen in place, like, oh my God, what am I going to do? He's like he's coming over to me. So he's beelining right at her. And then he just breezes right past her. And she's like, okay. We find out that something happened between Michael and Rika 3 years ago. And it was like this day where he finally noticed her, but they haven't really spoken since this happened. So then Rika ends up leaving after she gets like cold shouldered by Michael, and she goes back to her house to find her mother passed out in her bed, like passed out asleep, likely due to drugs or alcohol. After Rika's father died when she was a child, her mother has not been able to recover really from the loss, and her mother kind of became withdrawn. And because her mother kind of became withdrawn when she was young, the Christ's house became like a second home to her, and they even gave her her own room in their house. When Rika goes home and she goes into her bedroom window, she notices that there is a candle lit on her windowsill. And when she walks over to it and she looks at the candle, she looks down out of her window and she sees 3 men all dressed in black hoodies and masks that cover their entire face. So the tallest is on the left, and he has a gray mask with claw marks down the right side. The middle is shorter with a black and white mask that has a red stripe running down his face. The one on the right, his mask is all black, and it kind of like blends right into his hoodie. So she looks down and she sees these 3 men in these masks staring up at her window at her, and obviously is terrified. But she's terrified because she actually knows exactly who these 3 people are, but she just like does not want to believe that it's true. We don't know who these people are yet, but she does. And so she turns away to call her driver because she just wants to get out of her house because she's so scared. But then when she looks back after she makes the call, they're all gone. Okay, now we're flashing back to 3 years ago. And this is when Rika is a junior in high school. And the date is October 30th, which they call Devil's Night. It is the night before Halloween. They're in class, and all of the students in class are like buzzing with excitement because there's a rumor going around that the 4 horsemen, I can't take this seriously. There's a rumor going around that the 4 horsemen are coming back into the school for the start of the Devil's Night festivities. So, the 4 horsemen are, I gotta put my notes down. The 4 horsemen are Damon Torrance, Will Grayson III, Kai Mori, and Michael Christ. Those are the 4 horsemen, okay? Those are our four men. And get used to those 4 because we have to see a lot of them. So, just so you know. So the 4 of them are their best friends, they're former basketball teammates, and they were like the most popular kids in school, but they all graduated a little over a year ago. So everybody is super excited because they think that these 4 people that graduated high school over a year ago are going to come back into their high school. And like, why would they want to do that? Like, whatever. It's weird to me. I don't know. Let me know. I feel like that's weird, but to each their own, I guess. And towards the end of the period, their class starts hearing music and pounding on lockers that are like coming closer and closer into the room. And all of the students are like super excited. They're now like getting out of their chairs and like going to the windows of their classroom to try to like look for them down the hallway. So they're all trying to look for them. And then finally the 4 horsemen file into Rika's classroom. So they come into the classroom, and the reason that they come in there is because they're actually pulling basketball team like players to come and do like a hazing initiation of sorts. You can tell that I don't really get why, but that's what they're doing. Yeah, you might be asking, why are these 4 guys coming back to their high school to help initiate the high school basketball team that they have not played for over a year. I don't know. So they come in and they're like, okay, we're going to just take you guys out of class and you're just going to leave school. And the teacher basically doesn't even protest to this because apparently they're so intimidating that a teacher is like, okay, you can just take them out of my class. Like, that's fine. They're like walking like up and down the aisles, whatever, like pulling the teammates. And then like a couple girls are like, oh, we're going to go too. And so like they get up to go. And like, as they're kind of like leaving, Michael stops at Rika's desk and he just like stares down at her with his mask. And he has a red mask. I forgot to say it's like red with like black in it. I tried to recreate that to wear because if you can't tell, I'm wearing a black hoodie, so I'm cosplaying as one of the four horsemen. But I tried to do that and it looked absolutely terrible. So there are no masks that I could find on Amazon that resembled Michael Chris' mask. So I'm so sorry to disappoint you. Michael stares Rika down and then he just kind of like leaves. So great. So yeah, Devil's Night is a party night for the town where all of the basketball players will party and get drunk. And then later in the night, the four horsemen will pull pranks and wreak havoc on the town. So not only do these four grown men come back to their high school to relive their glory days, they also are now going to pull pranks in around town. Sick. Yeah, all the basketball players get pulled from class. A couple girls decide to go as well. And they leave. So now we are going to flash back to present day. And so this is when Rika is now moving to Meridian City to start her second year of college. So she arrives at her new apartment complex in Meridian City to move in. But when she goes to like the front desk man and she's like, hey, I'm moving in. He's like, okay, great. I'll show you to your apartment. She's really confused when he leads her to a penthouse and she's like, no, I leased a one bedroom. I am not living in the penthouse. The front desk man is like, oh, they rented out the one bedroom. So you're just going to get the penthouse for the same price. Like, isn't that so lucky you? And she walks into the penthouse and she sees that it has already been completely furnished. And literally everything has already been done for her. And so she's really frustrated because it is exactly the same as like her life in Thunder Bay where everybody just kind of like coddles her and does everything for her. She moves into the penthouse and she's sleeping and she gets startled awake that night when she hears somebody like banging around. And I'm saying banging in like multiple contexts. If you know what I mean. So she gets so scared because it's supposed to be a completely vacant apartment. So she's like, what is going on in there? That does not sound good. And it wasn't like, the noises were not like, they were like yelling, like not happy noises. I don't know. I can't go into further detail. I could, but I don't want to. She is like freaking out and she decides to just bolt into the lobby and tell like the staff that there is somebody occupying a seemingly vacant apartment. She is sprinting down the stairs into the lobby and then she literally smacks right into Michael. And she's really surprised to see him because what is he doing in her apartment complex? And she's especially surprised to see him because he is standing with a woman. He has a woman with him. And then he just decides to be awful and he just like embarrasses her and like upsets her because he introduces her to the woman he's with as his little brother's girlfriend, even though he knows that she broke up with Trevor. He still is referring to her as his little brother's girlfriend. So she also finds out, lucky her, that he also lives in the same building as her. And then he goes with Rika to make sure that she gets to her apartment safely. But the weird thing is when they get into the elevator, he clicks her floor number. Like he already knows where her apartment is. So that's creepy. He then like checks out the hallway and the vacant room And he's like, dude, there's nothing there. So then Rika is like, I did not ask you to come up here. Like, I don't need your help. Like, can you just leave me alone? Michael says something that will become very important for the rest of the book, okay? He says, quote, "But what if one day you found that all those securities you took for granted, your house, your money, and the people who love you, weren't there anymore? Would you need help then? Would you finally realize how very brittle you are without those comforts you seem to think you don't need?" With those lovely, ominous words, Michael leaves. Now we get our first chapter, present day, in Bestie Michael's POV. But once we get into Michael's POV, we realize that he's not as unbothered by Rika as he appears. He says that he like sees right through her like good girl, dutiful daughter facade and sees the terrible person underneath. So we're left to wonder, like, what did Rika do to make Michael think that she is a terrible person? Because when we get into his point of view, like, he hates her, and he thinks to himself, quote, "She was here and so was I, only I wasn't alone. And the best part, she didn't know that we were coming for her." Can you guess who we is? We'll see. Will, Damon, and Kai, the rest of the horsemen, they show up at Michael's apartment. So they're still friends. And it's been a little over 3 years since this whole thing went down. We learn that Damon was actually the person that was banging around in that empty apartment. So there was somebody in there. And Michael knew that out. And then we learn a huge part of the plot. That Will, Kai, and Damon have all recently been released from prison. Something happened 3 years ago that caused all of them to be thrown into prison. But that thing that happened, somehow Michael escaped being thrown into prison. So Kai and Will were in prison for like 3 years. And then Damon was in prison like a little bit longer than the two of them. So these two, we assume, went to prison for the same reason. He went for a different reason, and he somehow got out unscathed. The thing that got them sent to prison, we are assuming, happened in 3 years ago flashback. The thing that happened 3 years ago, they are blaming Rika for them getting sent to prison. For whatever it is, they think that she is behind them going to prison. We don't know what she did to get them allegedly sent to prison. We won't find out for a million years. Kai, Damon, and Will got like a little bit overexcited and ahead of themselves, and they just wanted to like freak her out. So remember when she saw those three men standing outside of her window? Did you guess correctly? It was the three of them. I'm probably going to get this wrong, but I think he is the all black mask. He is the mask with the red stripe, and he is the gray claw mark mask. I am probably wrong. You can tell that I don't know for sure, and I do not feel like going back to check. All you need to know, he's got a red mask. Michael finds out that they were standing outside of her window, and he kind of chides them for like getting ahead of themselves and doing that, because he's like, that's not part of our plan. Whatever that plan is, it's not part of it. And then the three of them are like, dude, you've been out here in your cushy life playing professional basketball while we've been in prison. So don't tell us that we can't spook her a little bit. Basically, we find out that the four horsemen have executed some kind of plan to take things from her, from Rika. We aren't sure what those things are yet, but the horsemen have to wait to make sure that they don't scare her off and ruin their plan. So that's why Michael was annoyed that they were outside of her window, because one, they revealed themselves, and two, they're already spooking her. And then Michael thinks to himself, quote, 3 years ago, curious little Erica Fane wanted to play with the boys, so we indulged her, and she betrayed us. There was no way we'd forget. Once restitution was paid, my friends could have peace. I'm going to take a quick break from the plot to explain the Four Horsemen's dynamic. They are all best friends, and they all played on their high school basketball team together, and they were all like really good. Like Michael went pro, so they were all really talented basketball players. I'm gonna go pre-prison, okay? Pre-prison, Michael was like the leader of their group, he kind of could tell them like what to do in a sense. And out of these three, Kai is Michael's closest friend. And then Damon and Will are best friends. Kai is the son of an influential socialite and a banker. Damon is the son of a media mogul. And Will Grayson III is the grandson of a senator. And then I think he's the son of like a real estate guy. Yeah, so Kai is thought to be the nicest out of all of them. And then Will is like considered like the class clown. He doesn't take anything too seriously. He like loves to party. He drinks a lot. Damon is an absolute menace. He is like Rika describes Michael as like kind of like hot scary. And then she describes Damon as like just scary. He also is a chain smoker of cigarettes he's been chain smoking since he was like 14 or something crazy. So now we're in post-prison dynamic. Like I was telling you before, these three are a lot more unpredictable, especially Kai. We start to see, because Kai was like very disciplined and like nice. Like he was nice. And then post-prison, you can tell that he is like at his breaking point. They are still allowing Michael to kind of captain their revenge plot against Rika, but Michael can tell that they're definitely getting restless and like antsy. And now that they're all out of prison, because they had to wait for Damon to get out of prison. So now that they're all out, they're like, we need to do this right now, because this revenge against her is like a big part of what kept them going in prison, is to get revenge on the person that put them there. Michael is like kind of concerned about this, and he goes to talk to Kai about the fact that that Will and Damon are losing the plot a bit. And then Kai warns Michael that Will and Damon are only loyal to each other after all that they went through in prison, and that they will not be as easy to control as they were in high school. So Michael thinks to himself, quote, "We had rules. We weren't going to hurt her. We were going to ruin her. I knew Damon and Will would try to break those rules, but what about Kai? Would he step in and reel them back as he'd always done?" Michael asks Kai if prison changed him, to which Kai responds, "I guess we'll see." So that's alarming. So I think Michael is starting to notice that the control is slipping more than he expected it to. Alrighty. So we are going to go back to 3 years ago in Rika's POV. So once everybody leaves, like to go to some undisclosed location for Devil's Night from their high school, Rika decides to like follow them out, like kind of sneaks out and follows them. And then she gets into the trunk of somebody's car heading to wherever they're going for Devil's Night. So now she's in the back of the car. So then the cars finally stop at their destination, and Rika gets out to just like survey her surroundings. And they are at an old town structure called St. Killian's, which is basically like this giant stone church that used to be a town landmark, but it became unused due to a hurricane in 1938. So St. Killian's is also rumored to have catacombs below it. And Rika is like kind of just snooping around when she gets caught by Michael. And he warns her that she shouldn't be there. And she just says that she like wanted to see what was going on. I should also mention that the entire time that they're having this conversation, Michael has that dumb ass mask on. Anyway, in response to this, Rika, when Rika says that she wants to see, Michael takes her tie off of her school uniform and ties it around her eyes to blindfold her. He then leads her into St. Killian's until they make it into the entrance of the catacombs. Once they make it into the entrance of the catacombs, he just leaves her there. And these two girls, this is so funny to me. These two girls walk past her and they say, quote, "Not sure what they have planned for you, honey, but I'm jealous." So Rika's just standing there for a while until somebody starts talking to her and calls her Trevor's girlfriend. And this is 3 years ago, so her and Trevor aren't dating yet at this point. She immediately recognizes the person that is talking to her as Damon, which is a bad sign, and her guard is up. So she still has the blindfold on, but Damon starts getting way too aggressive with her. Kai finds them and eventually gets Damon to back off, but not before Rika bites his lip so hard, Damon's lip so hard, that he bleeds because Damon forcefully tries to kiss her. He's awful. So once Kai shoos Damon away, he asks her if she's okay. And Rika is surprised that Kai knows her name, even though she's basically like grown up with Michael's family and the Horsemen have been friends since they were kids. Kai is surprised that Rika thinks that he wouldn't know who she is. And he rattles off like a lot of facts about her that I guess would be valuable for you to know about Rika's character. The main one you need to know is that she loves fencing, like the sport with the swords. And then Kai tells her, quote, "You wore an amazing black bikini at the 4th of July cookout at the beach this past summer. I looked longer than I should have." Rika begins to try to make her way into the catacombs by herself, still blindfolded, but then she runs into somebody else, and she runs into another person. And who do you think that person is? It's Michael. Michael has been there the whole time. He watched her like get harassed by Damon. He watched that whole conversation with her and Kai. Rika tells him in reference to the Damon situation, like, you shouldn't be okay with the fact that he did that to me. To which Michael tells her, quote, "Toughen up. You're not a victim and I'm not your savior. You handled it. End of story." Finally, Michael leads Rika into the catacombs to discover what everybody tells her that she should not be seeing. It turns out that everybody is probably right. Because long story short, the catacombs are filled with people doing the deed in front of a bunch of other people. They have like this whole conversation about like not fitting into the box that people put you in, and you know, you're drinking the Kool-Aid and you can't. And eventually Rika's like trying to ask Michael, like, "Why did you bring me down here? Why did you bring me down here?" And he just will not answer. And so she gets frustrated and she pulls her blindfold off and she leaves. But Michael catches her arm and brings her into a more secluded room where it seems like he's about to kiss her until somebody barges into the room and ruins their moment. Who do you think that guy is? It's Trevor. Yeah. Okay, now we're back to present day and we're with Rika. So she is preparing to start at Meridian City College in a few days, and she's just like finalizing her schedule. And then she gets a call from an unknown number, which turns out to be Trevor. He's sounding a lot less cranky than he did the last time she saw him. He asks her how her new apartment is, and she tells him that although she loves his mom, she did not have to go and put Rika in this big giant penthouse and furnish it for her. Basically, this back and forth takes place where you realize Trevor has no idea what she's talking about. Trevor is like, "What apartment building are you living in?" And she tells him Delcor. The apartment building is called Delcor. And he goes, "Why didn't you tell me you're living in Delcor?" Rika doesn't really respond right away. And then Trevor says that he wants her to find a new apartment immediately and that she will not be living in Delcor. And this frustrates Rika because she's like, "You can't tell me where I can live. Also, I'm not going to move apartments when I have to start college in like a couple days." Trevor is not letting up, and he says, "I don't want you to be there," he reiterated, barking his order. "Do you understand?" I clenched my teeth. "No," I gritted out. "I don't understand, because you're not explaining it to me. And the last time I checked, you're not my father." I heard his bitter laugh on the other end. "You probably planned this, didn't you? You knew exactly what you were doing." I shook my head, closing my eyes. I had no idea what he was talking about, but I no longer cared. I'm not moving. I don't want to. Trevor says, no, I don't suppose you do. Finally, Rika comes to the realization that Trevor obviously did not want her to live there because Michael also lives there. So Rika tries to enter like this super fancy fitness club later that day because she finds out that they have like a fencing club. Of course, that exact moment that she's trying to like enter the club, Michael is leaving the fitness club and he tells her that she can't go in there because it's a men's only fitness club. And Michael's like, can I just take you home? Because we live in the same place and it's raining. I'll just take you home. Rika takes this chance to run into the gentleman's club because she thinks that it's like funny or something. And Michael chases her in there and she's kind of like trying to like weave her way through the club and like hide from him. And he's like yelling after her. And when she's hiding from him in there, she spots somebody lounging and smoking a cigarette in a fitness club. Who is going to smoke a cigarette in a fitness club? You already know. It's Damon. So she sees Damon for the first time since he was in prison. Before, when they had the masks on, she didn't want to believe it. But now it is confirmed to her that Damon is here, not only out of prison, but here in Meridian City where she lives. So she thinks to herself, quote, my stomach clenched at the stench, bringing back memories of that night. I'd had to take 2 showers to get that smell off me. I might have felt a little bad over the years about what happened to his friends, but to him, not so much. So Michael finally catches up to Rika, and she is just kind of shell-shocked to learn that his friends are out of prison. Michael is just done with Rika's antics, and he just starts going in on her about how she's a child and she's immature, and he's just going at her, and he makes her cry. And she rushes out into the exit. And as she's trying to make her retreat, she runs smack into Kai. So this sends her into a bit of a panic because she realizes that if Damon and Kai are here, Will is probably here too. And that all 4 of the horsemen are in the health club that she is in right now. And so she just runs for the exit. Rika and Michael have a heated argument where Rika realizes that she's just tired of either being forced into a relationship with Trevor, who's overbearing and suffocating, or wanting to be with someone who talks down to her and treats her like a child. So now we're in present day in Michael's POV, and he's just frustrated after his argument with Rika. So he heads off to one of his favorite clubs in the city, and he sees that his friends are already there. So Kai notices that Michael is visibly flustered, and the 2 of them get into an argument. Michael tries to grab for Kai's shirt collar to strong arm him like he used to be able to get away with in high school. But post-prison Kai is not having it. Kai tells Michael that he wants to see Rika begging at their feet. And even though he'd like for Michael to be part of a plan, they do not need him to be. Michael thinks about how much Kai has changed since he was in prison and how much their friendship has changed as well. He thinks to himself, quote, in many ways, he was the same as he had always been. The thinker, the reasonable one, the brother who always looked out for the rest of us. But in many ways, he had changed beyond recognition. He never smiled anymore. He took courses of action he wouldn't have in high school, even knowing the consequences. And not once did I see him do one thing for pleasure since he'd gotten out. He needed to lose control because I was starting to get concerned about whatever he was bottling up. Kai leads Michael to the back of the club where Damon and Will are, and they have a discussion about getting rid of Rika's mother. When asked how gone they want her, Michael responds with buried, which is really alarming to hear. Michael reveals to the rest of the guys that he has procured Rohypnol, which are roofies, and he's going to give them to Rika's mom if she isn't already drunk like she typically is. He tosses the roofies to Damon, and when Kai tells Damon to give it to him, Damon only gives him one of the 2 pills. Damon says with a smirk, quote, you only need 1 for the bomb. These things are pretty effective. Gross. Will breathes out a half-hearted laugh, and Michael thinks to himself, quote, even he, referring to Will, had limits. Not that Damon didn't, we just didn't know for sure. If we'd ever seen him use anything like that, we would have killed him. But he also never gave us the impression that he wasn't just that effed up. Kai then snatches the bag out of Damon's hand, prompting a fight that leads us to find out the reason that Damon got put in jail. Damon slept with an underage girl when he was 19. So that's why he was in prison a little bit longer than these two. So how did all of this come out? How did this happen? How did he get arrested? That will be a question that is answered in, spoiler, Damon's book. Yes, Damon gets his own book. So flash forward a few days after this whole conversation. Michael is in the locker room of his gym because in case you forgot, he's a professional basketball player. I certainly forgot because it is so irrelevant to the plot. So he's in his locker room and he gets a phone call from his younger brother, Trevor, who is Rika's ex-boyfriend. And Trevor, this is a good phone call because Trevor goes mask off in this phone call. And we really get an idea about like what he really thinks of Rika and how he sees her and like how he views her as a human woman. I'm going to tell you basically this entire phone call because I do think that it is kind of important into Michael and Trevor's relationship. Trevor says, quote, "I thought maybe when I grew up, we'd have more in common or we'd speak to each other in more than just 2-word sentences. I used to try and blame it on you. You were cold and distant and you never gave us a chance to be brothers. But then you know what? When I was about 16, so this is the age that like all this stuff is going down with Rika on Devil's Night, I realized something. It wasn't your fault. I honestly hated you as much as you hated me for the same single reason. Her." Michael asks, "Her?" And Trevor responds, "You know who I'm talking about." Michael says, "Trevor, your girlfriend is your issue." To which Trevor says, "But that's not true, is it? Because when I was a teenager, I realized it wasn't just her. It was you too. You wanted her and you hated that I was always around and you definitely hated that she was meant for me. You couldn't be my brother because I had the one thing you wanted, and I hated you because the one thing I had wanted you instead." So Trevor then flaunts the fact that he was the one to take Rika's virginity, and he says, quote, "So now that you've got her at Delcor, finally all to yourself, and you do to her whatever it is you have planned, remember that I will get her back and that it will be me who puts a ring on her finger and keeps her forever." Trevor then threatens Michael that if he sleeps with Rika, and I'm putting this in a much nicer way than Trevor phrases it, that if Michael sleeps with Rika, that Trevor will make sure that marrying Trevor will be the nightmare of Rika's life. Okay, so now we're going back to 3 years ago with Rika. So Trevor has just caught Rika in this room alone with Michael, seemingly about to kiss, and Trevor has not spoken to her since he drove her home after that. Rika tells us that the only reason that she left with Trevor is because she was worried that he would rat her out to her mom, which I feel like is such a Trevor thing to do. Like, does Trevor not give off like the biggest rat vibe? After checking on her mom, Rika ventures back over to the Christs for dinner. When Rika gets to the Christ house for dinner, she realizes that Michael and all of his friends are playing basketball in the Christ full indoor basketball court in their house. That's how rich they are. They have a full basketball court in their house. So it's Mrs. Christ, Rika, Trevor, and the Horsemen. They all sit down for a super awkward dinner because the whole catacomb scene took place earlier that day. Trevor is still quietly seething over the entire situation. And so when Mrs. Christ gets up to do something, this is the most painful conversation ever. Trevor looks accusingly at Michael and he says, "Stay away from her." And Michael responds and he says, "Who?" And Trevor goes, "Rika, she's mine." And then Michael just looks at him again and says, "Who?" And Rika is sitting right there. It's so terrible and it gets worse. And all of the rest of the Horsemen are like trying not to laugh at this whole situation. And then like when Trevor's like, "She's mine." And Rika's like, "Trevor, I'm not yours. Like, I'm not anyone's." And then Trevor decides that the appropriate response to her saying this is to look at her and say, quote, "You'd screw him in a heartbeat if he looked at you twice." And I'm not using the real word he used for screw because it's a swear word. Unsurprisingly, this lovely comment from bestie Trevor causes Rika to immediately leave and go home. At home, she texts her friend, Noah, who I'm not putting on here because he literally could not be less important. He just does not matter at all. It is annoying to me. One of my biggest qualms with this first book is the fact that there are like no women in this book except for her and her, but we're not there yet. Rika has like no female friends. She has one friend that's a man. Rika's like, let's do something fun. And Noah's like, yeah, let's go to this party. And so Rika's on her way out of the house to meet up with Noah when a car pulls into her driveway. And none other than Michael comes out of the driver's seat of that car and tells Rika to get in. With very little convincing, even though he just completely embarrassed her like an hour ago. She gets in the car. So they take Rika to this super creepy abandoned house and they freak her out because they think it's funny. They say a lot of really creepy stuff to her. They then light the house on fire. It's like an abandoned, there's nobody in there. I also want to note that when they light all of this stuff on fire, they all have like their masks on their face. And Rika has her hood up because they don't give her a mask. But they record this prank on a burner phone that they record like all of their Devil's Night pranks on. I think you know where this is going to be going. So they're all making their way back into the car. And as Rika is climbing into the back seat, somebody yanks her out and slams her against the side of the car. Who would do something like that? It was Damon, of course. So he begins to interrogate her about why Michael is taking such a special interest in her and bringing her along to all these things when it's usually just the four of them. She's like, I don't know. You ask him, he's your friend. I don't know why he's doing all this stuff all of a sudden. Damon tells her, quote, don't think you're special. Lots of women get him. No one keeps him. And then he lets Rika actually get in the car. So then Michael's like, no. You can't sit in the back. You got to sit up here with me. You got to sit on my lap in the passenger seat because for some reason, Kai needs to drive the car and they can't have anybody in the back seat. So Rika has to go sit on his lap. And she's like, okay. So she goes and she sits on his lap. We're going back to present day. So Rika is attending a college lecture and officially meets the woman that Michael was with in the elevator when she first ran into him at Delcor. And her name is Alex Palmer. That's her right there. We love her. And then they're just like kind of talking and then they go to their lecture. And then Damon and Will show up to their college lecture. And mind you, even though we've been reading about the Horsemen scheming for Rika's suffering all this time, Rika does not know that they hate her. She has no idea that they hate her. Damon then threatens Rika's mother, and Rika tells him that if he ever threatens her again, that she will call the police. So we learn that Rika is under the impression that her mother is on her way to Europe to join Mrs. Christ on their yacht. Will and Damon continue to get in Rika's face until they finally leave the lecture. Rika then tries to get a hold of her mom on the phone, and her mom does not answer. She then calls Michael's father's office to see if he can tell her anything about her mom's whereabouts, since she is supposedly with Mrs. Christ on their yacht, but she does not get an answer. She decides that she has to ask Michael if he can give Rika the number to the satellite phone that's on the yacht. So she has to head up to his penthouse to try to get the info out of him. So then Rika steps out of the elevator into Michael's penthouse. And of course, our three other best friends are there. Michael, Will, and Kai are there already. And unsurprisingly, Rika's attempt to get this phone number from Michael does not go well. And Michael tells her that he will give Rika the number if she comes to a pool party with them, and she refuses, telling them that she'll just get the number from Michael's father. She turns to leave, and then Michael picks her up and brings her back into the room where all of the horsemen are. Rika shoves Michael away from her and falls to the ground. Michael kneels to the floor so that he's level with her, and then tells her, quote, I thought you were one of us. And this brings Rika back to Devil's Night when she was 16, when Will had told her that she was one of them now. And Rika tells Michael that she doesn't understand the game he's playing. And he says all she needs to know is that she can't tap out. He then kisses her in front of all the horsemen as they just like watch this whole exchange. Unfortunately, Rika reciprocates this kiss quite enthusiastically. All of Michael's friends are like jeering when Michael pulls away. And then they're like, Rika, you got to go to the pool party if you want to get the number. So she goes down to put her swimsuit on because we're going to a pool party. But not before we go 3 years back again, flashing back to Rika on Michael's lap now after the fire prank. And Rika finds out that she also gets to pull a prank because each of the horsemen pull a prank on Devil's Night. So she finds out that she also gets to pull a prank. So she's just kind of like thinking about what she wants to do. So then Kai then begins to speed up and seems to be heading straight at two giant trucks that are taking up most of the highway. So they actually orchestrated this so that those trucks are going to go that way, and they're blocking the road now for the police and fire trucks that are currently at the fire so that they can't get back into town. Sure. So they, like, the reason that they needed the back seat room is because the truck people that were blocking the road were like some of the basketball cronies. So then they picked those basketball cronies up and then they dropped them off at like some diner. And then the horsemen and Rika start heading back to Thunder Bay. They're now heading to do Damon's prank, which takes place at the mayor of Thunder Bay's house. So Damon sneaks into the mayor's house to do God knows what. And then over half an hour later, Damon emerges. He alludes to sleeping with the mayor's daughter, who is 16. How is that a prank? I don't know. So we're not going to dwell on it too long because now we're headed back over to a local teen hangout to grab food. And I know that it sounds stupid calling it a local teen hangout, but I don't really know what to describe it as. It's like a diner / like bar, but you can go if you're under 21. Like that's where all the like the high schoolers hang out. They're all ready to head in, and then Rika sees something in the diner that makes her be like, you know what? I don't want to go. You guys go. I'm going to wait in the car. I don't want to go. And for some reason, this pisses Michael off that she doesn't want to go into the restaurant. And he's like getting all in her face and stuff. And she's like, she finally tells him the truth to why she doesn't want to go in. There are two people in there that Rika wants to avoid. And their names are Miles Anderson and then his girlfriend, Astrid. So Miles Anderson is the new captain of their high school basketball team. And he is just an absolute piece of garbage, just like majority of the people in these books. Rika tells Michael that Miles roofied her at a party last spring and that Miles' girlfriend Astrid was actually the one that gave the roofie to her, but Miles was in on it. Rika's friend Noah noticed something was wrong before Miles could do anything bad, but he would have if he hadn't gotten caught. Rika told her mom, who called the school. Rika wanted to go and like get a drug test for how she got roofied. Eventually, though, nothing happened. We find out that the Christs are in real estate with Miles's family. So they sweep it under the rug because they're still in business with them. And this like absolutely enrages Michael. And then Rika finally decides on her prank, which is to get revenge on Miles and Astrid. And so she tells the horsemen that she's going to lead Miles and Astrid into the bathroom and for them to follow Rika in after a few minutes of her being in there with them. So Rika grabs Will's flask and stumbles into the bar pretending to be drunk already. She then bumps into Miles and fake flirts with him, telling him that her and Trevor got into a fight. And she asks him where the bathroom is, and then he takes her there and follows her in. Miles gets more and more aggressive, and then Rika grabs like a metal soap pump while Miles is distracted. And then somebody bursts through the door, and Rika has like this wave of relief, but it's short-lived because the person that burst through the door is actually Astrid, Miles's girlfriend. So Astrid starts getting in Rika's face, and we learn that Astrid likes to watch Miles with other girls. Michael tries to get a hold of Rika again, but she whirls around and slams him across the face with the metal soap pump. She then smacks Astrid into the mirror of the bathroom, and it shatters it. Rika gets a couple more hits in, and finally the horsemen come into the bathroom and see Rika doing all this stuff. And then Rika is relieved that she can leave the horsemen to deal with it. And then as Rika's leaving, she screams at Michael and Astrid to never come near her again. So then Rika goes in to wait in the car while the horsemen make sure that Miles and Astrid really understand to never mess with Rika again. So now we're back in present day, and we're at the pool party. And she heads into the pool and gets approached by Alex Palmer. And Alex comes over to Rika and offers her a shot, and then they have like a nice bonding convo. I really like Alex. She's like a very confident and patient, loyal person. We get to know her a lot more throughout the series. So Rika and her chatting by the pool. Alex excuses herself to go to the bathroom, and then while she's gone, Rika wanders into like some hidden grotto in the pool by herself. And guess who follows her in there? Damon. Damon, once again, tries to terrorize Rika because he is just unhinged. And he gets all in her face in the grotto and he tells her, quote, "I could tear you limb from limb and I wouldn't even break a sweat." During this ambush by Damon, we get an important nugget of information. Damon asks Rika, quote, "You never told Michael what happened that night, did you?" And Rika shoots back, "How did you know I haven't?" And Damon answers, "Because he would have killed me already." Damon keeps antagonizing Rika, and eventually Michael shows up, gets Damon to leave. When Damon leaves, Rika and Michael go to third base in the grotto. After they're done, Rika realizes that Kai was also in the grotto, potentially watching the entire thing. We know for sure that he caught the end of the show. Michael doesn't seem surprised that Kai was in there, which is interesting. After this, Rika runs out of the grotto, and as she's passing Kai, Kai tells her, "Run all you want, little monster. We're faster." Now, we're back. Present day, Michael's POV. This is post-grotto. So, Rika runs out, and Michael and Kai get into it once again. Kai tells Michael, quote, "You're eating off the community plate, brother, and you're taking more than your fair share." Michael says, "You know, this leash you keep trying to put me on is getting tighter. The day I start feeling the need to explain myself to you, I'll be dead. You got that?" Kai says, "I'll remember you said that. The same goes for Will, Damon, and me." Michael asks, "What's that supposed to mean?" But Kai only looked up at him, a sinister smile in his eyes. And for the first time, I didn't trust Kai. So things are not looking too good for the Horsemen's friendship right now. So then Kai asks Michael what the status is with Rika's house, whatever that means. And Michael says that he's taking care of it. When Michael leaves the cave, he realizes that Alex left with Rika to take them back to Delcor. Michael didn't plan on hooking up with Rika in the grotto, but her defiance surprised him and kind of like brought him back to their relationship 3 years ago. But when he thinks about his friends and how badly their lives have been impacted by whatever she did 3 years ago, he thinks to himself, "We needed to get this shit done so we could all go on with our lives. I was constantly distracted from basketball. Kai was turning more and more inward. Damon was a ticking bomb, and I was pretty sure that Will couldn't get through a day without a drink anymore. I thought they'd slowly start reacclimating to life and all the possibilities of what their futures held. But it was getting worse, not better. This bullshit needed to end, and I needed them back on track. Pretty soon, those 3 years away would just seem like a bad memory. They'd been offered jobs, places within their family circles to get their lives going again, but none of them wanted to even talk about it. Nothing existed beyond Rika and today. They didn't even want to see any family or spend any time in Thunder Bay. My friends, my brothers, were dead on the inside. And the more I thought about what she'd done to them, to us, the more I wanted to rip her apart. I only hoped that what we were about to do would bring them back." Michael then goes to visit his absolute sleazeball of a father to talk about his future. But this is basically just like a ruse for Michael to try to get his father to hand over all of Rika's family assets. Because when Rika's father passed away, basically like her trust went into the hands and is managed by the Christ's like company. Michael's father refuses to hand over the Fane's asset because all of that will be going to Trevor one day when him and Rika inevitably get married. And then Mr. Christ tells Michael, quote, "It'll be some time after they both graduate," he told me. "We can't have her spreading her wings too wide and taking off. He'll marry her, put a Christ baby in her, and everything Fane will be ours, including little Rika. That's the plan." So he's also just a creep. Mr. Chris details that he doesn't, just to make him even more disgusting, he details that he doesn't even really care whose baby Rika gets pregnant with, as long as it's one of the Christ men, including himself. But Michael eventually convinces his father to hand over the Fane estate until Rika at least graduates college, where it will all go to her per her father's will and when her and Trevor get married. So before Michael leaves, he asks his father why his father did not consider Michael to marry Rika. His father tells him, "I did. You're too volatile, and I need her happy and pliant. You'd make her miserable." And with that, Michael leaves his father's office. In the elevator, he opens his phone to a text from Will, and it reads, "No more house." Michael freaks out hearing this, and he orders his driver to take him to the Fane house. The driver obliges, telling him that he already called 911 and that fire trucks are on the way. Okay, there's no time to dwell on that because we're switching back to 3 years ago in Rika's POV. So she just left the diner so that the horsemen can deal with Miles and Astrid, and she's waiting in the car when the horsemen come out of the diner to join her in the car, and Will then hands Rika 2 souvenirs from Miles and Astrid, a rope of Astrid's hair and one of Miles' teeth. The boys assure Rika that Miles and Astrid will never get near her again. Rika asks if Miles and Astrid will tell on the horsemen, to which Michael responds, "Who are they going to tell? My dad is in 3 real estate ventures with the Andersons." So they're driving along to finally go eat something when they drive past a gazebo in the park. Will yells at Michael to stop the car, telling them she finished it. We have no idea who she is. Will then takes a bottle of liquor, a rag, and a box of matches and gets out of the car, pulling his mask on to cover his face. The rest of the horsemen get out to follow him because apparently the rules are that they all have to go together whenever they do their prank. Will's super fun prank is burning down a gazebo in the middle of like a park that has people in it. But Will lights the gazebo on fire anyways. Rika runs back to their car and dials 911, and she's like, "I'm not doing this prank, whatever." And Michael's like, "Then go home." But she doesn't go home. She just kind of like lingers by the car. That's when she notices a cop coming towards the horsemen. They all put their hands up, but the cop doesn't have their identities since they all have their masks on. The cop asks them to take the masks off, and Rika decides that she can't hide in the car and let them get arrested. So she grabs a crowbar that is apparently just laying in the car, and she goes outside to a shop nearby the park. Conveniently, Rika's family owns a jewelry store that's like in this, like town square or whatever. And so she takes the crowbar and she smashes out the windows of her family's jewelry store. And then she realizes like, oh my God, I'd just be leaving all this jewelry to be stolen. So she steals all of her family's jewelry out of her jewelry store. So obviously all the alarms go off in the jewelry store, distracting the cop, and Rika runs off. So the horsemen pick her up when she runs off, and like they know that she's the one that basically saved them from getting arrested. This is like a huge bonding moment for Rika and the horsemen, and they are all in like super high spirits. And so then they head off to go to like one of the parties that is like going on for Devil's Night. Back to present day with Rika. So Rika has just learned that her house is burning down. And she is desperately trying to get a hold of her mother. She pulls up to the house and is devastated to see that it has been completely destroyed. She's in a complete panic because she doesn't know where her mom is, and she's completely freaking out when Michael shows up. Rika goes into the shell of her house, finally realizing that her mom is out of town and that she's not in the house. Rika asks Michael where her mother is, and he doesn't answer. Michael tells her to stay at the Christ family house for the night and that they will come back to assess the damage in the morning. They go to a bar nearby, and Rika explains to Michael why she always carries a matchbox around. Her late father used to collect them when he would go on business trips and give them to Rika. She tells him that they were the only thing that mattered in her house, which surprises Michael. The horsemen assume that Rika was like materialistic and spoiled, and that burning down her house would crush her, only for Michael to learn that the only thing she cared about in there were her father's matches. She was never happy in her house after her father died, but she was always happy at the Christs. They have a conversation about like relating to people to songs, and when Michael finally asks what she would pick for him, she names a bunch of songs, kind of coming clean about her feelings for him, and she tells him, "You're in everything." She then tells him that she's tired and that she wants to go back to the Chris house to go to bed. Back at the Christs, which is completely empty, Rika and Michael make some sandwiches, and then they go to watch a movie. Of course, the Christs have a home theater. If they have a full court indoor basketball court, they have a home theater. I would like to quickly point out, though, that these sandwiches, that Michael eats a pickle and peanut butter sandwich. Is this a thing? So they go to the movie room, and Rika suggests Alien versus Predator, which she apparently has seen 1,000 times, but she doesn't tell Michael that. And she's like, oh, this looks good. Alien versus Predator. What's that? So they start watching it. And then once it ends, Michael tells Rika that he knows that she's seen that movie a bunch of times and speculates that she likes to be scared. So this convo then leads them to do some stuff in the movie room. And Michael tries to get Rika to admit that she likes being scared. She doesn't admit, though. And she doesn't give in. And thus ends their fooling around, and she goes to bed. Later that night, Rika is trying to go to sleep, and she gets up to attempt to turn on the light, but then she realizes that the electricity has been turned off. She freaks out, and then she goes into the hallway to see if Michael had anything to do with it, which she then gets ambushed by him, and he's wearing his red Devil's Night mask again, and Rika finally admits that she likes to be scared. And then, with that admission, Rika and Michael finally sleep together. I am not going to go into detail. If you want to read it, go ahead. All you need to know, though, is that he has her they go back to St. Killian's in the catacombs. She's to put her school uniform back on, like when she was 16. And they do the deed a second time in the catacombs of St. Killian. They're back at the Chris after the whole catacomb thing. And Rika had fallen asleep on the way home, so Michael carries her to bed, and he actually takes her to his bed. He then begins to feel regret over what he's done, especially because he is actively in the process of ruining her life. He helped burn her house down. They planned to burn her house down. The other 3 horsemen just did it before Michael thought they would. He realizes that he will never be able to be with her and gets mad at her all over again. In his anger, he texts Kai 2 words, finish it. After sending this, Michael thinks to himself, quote, now it was done and there was no going back. Now, we're going back to 3 years ago, this time in Michael's POV from 3 years ago. So this whole book, we think that Rika has just been pining over Michael and he has never given her a second thought. But in this chapter, we learn that he has had his eye on her as well. As they were growing up, he realized that it would always be her with Trevor, and he kind of started to resent him for it. He just then stopped being around Rika altogether when he went to college. But when she showed up at the catacombs, he just could not help himself. But everybody gets out after Rika smashes the jewelry store, and they're all excited. And everybody gets out of the car, and Will paints war paint on Rika's face with shoe polish. Is that a thing is that safe? Can you put that on your face? So then they all go to this party together, and Rika has her main character moment when she starts dancing with her friends, and all the horsemen are staring at her. And Michael gets a little bit worried and jealous when he sees Kai keep continually sneaking glances over at her. But eventually Rika breaks away from her friends and goes up to the balcony where Michael follows her. They then have their first kiss. And Rika asks him to take her to his car so that they can, go all the way. Mind you, she's 16 and he's 18. Yeah, she's 16 and he's 18. He refuses to do stuff with her because he's we need to wait until you turn 18. And Rika is well, what am I supposed to do? Wait around for you while you go to college and do whatever you want? And he's basically yeah. So he's yeah, basically. And on top of that, I don't want you to talk to Trevor, and I don't want you to go to my house unless I'm there. And even when I'm there, I'm going to act like you don't exist. And Rika goes to leave, and she tells him, quote, forever I've wanted you. This is so sad. Rika tells him, quote, forever I've wanted you, and now I feel dirty. I felt like your friend tonight. You saw me, you liked me, you respected me. And now I feel like a simple, stupid girl, a dirty secret that needs to sit quiet in a corner and wait for your word to speak or move. I don't feel like you're equal anymore. Which makes me very sad. Michael, always mature, calls her a stupid kid and that she's nobody to him. She's obviously very hurt by this interaction. And Michael can't stand to see her like this, so he runs away, telling the rest of the horsemen to make sure that she gets home. All right, we're back to present day with Rika, and she hasn't heard from Michael for 4 days. The morning after they did the deed, he texted her that he had to go back to the city and left her while she was still asleep. So now Rika is back in Meridian City and is in the library after one of her lectures because I forgot she's in college. And Alex comes over to her and they have a conversation about Alex being an escort and how she's doing it to pay for college, and there's nothing wrong with that. Sorry, I'm not really giving you like a lot of info on Alex's character, but we do get more of her as the series goes on. They part ways and Rika goes to buy some books, but when she swipes her credit card, it doesn't go through. And she tries again and it doesn't go through. And then she goes to a nearby ATM to check her account balance, and the number pops up on the screen and it's 0. She then goes to check her other account, also 0. All of her accounts are completely drained. She starts calling up their family accountant, who's also the Chris accountant, because their family is like in charge of Rika's stuff until she graduates. No answer. She tries calling anyone and everyone who might have an idea of what's going on, and absolutely no one is picking up. Things are looking really bad. She finally calls Mr. Chris' office, and his assistant asks Rika why she hasn't tried Michael. And Rika's like, why would I call Michael? And she's like, well, because Mr. Chris transferred power of attorney over to Michael last week, and he's currently in charge of everything until you graduate college. And she's like, what? And so she's obviously furious, and then she goes to the like gentleman's club, like the sports club, to find Michael, and she storms past the security to where Michael and the horsemen are eating together, and she walks up and just rips the tablecloth off of their table where they're eating with all the food on it. And Rika asks him where all of her money is, and somebody says, in my account. Rika expects Michael to be the one who answered, but it's actually Kai. Damon and Will tell her that her money is also in their accounts. Rika is shocked and confused and asks them what she did to deserve what is happening. No one explains, of course. Basically, they tell her that she is at their beck and call now, and that no one is around to do anything about it. Michael tells her that she needs to be at his family house in Thunder Bay tomorrow, and Rika is left feeling completely helpless. So basically, the horsemen have like executed their plan. They literally just wanted to leave Rika with nothing. She doesn't have her house. She doesn't know where her mom is. And now she has no money. So she's completely dependent on the horsemen to like live, apparently. And that's what they wanted. They wanted to take everything from her so that they could have full control over her. So the next day comes and Rika pulls up to the Chris house, and she takes a baseball bat with her into the house. She's using the baseball bat as a distraction so they don't realize that she has a knife taped to her arm under her sleeve. Rika really does not want to go into that house, but she realizes that the horsemen are the only people that can tell her where her mother actually is, so she decides to go in. Will immediately gets a hold of the bat and takes it from her hands. Will and Damon start antagonizing her and basically pushing her back and forth between them. And then Kai joins in the antagonizing as well. Rika still does not understand why they are doing this to her, and they still won't tell her why. All they offer her is, quote, payback, a little revenge, and restitution for time served. So Rika keeps asking them where Michael is, and he finally appears. They all continue to be awful, and it is revealed that they all know that Michael and her slept together. They keep going after her, and Damon gets more and more violent, pushing her to the floor and coming down on top of her. Someone is like yelling at him, trying to get him off, but Rika takes this moment to get the knife from her sleeve, and she stabs Damon, runs out of the house in the panic into the garden. She thinks to herself, quote, my mother. They had an endless amount of money and power to hide this. There were no videos of their deeds this time to get them arrested. I'd never find my mom, and I'd never get back everything my dad left me. Michael didn't care about his father or Trevor. He wouldn't listen to them when they eventually came, and by that time it might be too late for my mom. I had nowhere to go, and there was no one to help me. Rika feels so helpless, but then she remembers something Michael had once told her when he said, you're not a victim, and I'm not your savior. She thinks to herself, quote, once I was one of them. Once I ran with them, kept up with them, and stood next to them. I wasn't their victim. I'd learned how to fight. I wouldn't run. I would never run. I was built for this. Okay, so now we're switching, and we're in Michael's POV now. So they're dealing with the aftermath of Damon getting stabbed after Rika runs out into the garden. Unfortunately, the stab wound was not fatal. Sadly, he's fine. Michael knows Rika, though, and suspects that even though they just completely terrorized her, she's not going to go far. We find out that it was Michael who yelled at Damon when he got on top of Rika and tried to pull him off. Michael was secretly hoping that Rika would find a way to get out of this whole thing because he couldn't stand the thought of anyone else being with her but him, especially his friends. So Michael at this point does not want this to happen anymore, but he has no idea what to do to get his friends to stop. Damon wants to go out and get revenge on Rika for stabbing him, but Michael reveals to us that no one would be able to lay hands on her unless she agreed to their terms, which she did not. Damon then turns on Michael saying, quote, "I don't even know why you're here," he sneered, knocking my hand off his wound, making no move to get away. He turned his head, speaking to the other guys. "He got off scot-free. Didn't serve a day. So why are we even involving him?" I narrowed my eyes on him. "You think the past 3 years have been easy?" I charged. "I was the one to piss her off. She was mad at me that night, and you all paid the price. I had to look at her day after day, that lying, manipulative, vindictive bitch sitting 2 feet across the dinner table, knowing it was all my fault." I turned my head, looking back between Kai and Will, and then back at Damon. "You're my brothers, more than family. You guys served the time, and I have the guilt for it. We all paid." So, okay. Michael then tells Will to go into the yard to get Rika, but Will tells him that she's already coming back into the house. So Rika demands to know where her mother is, and Michael realizes that she's just not scared anymore. She's fully giving in to just being a badass now. So the horsemen tell her that they won't reveal where her mother is until she confesses to what she did and submits to them. Rika is like, "Confess to what? What are you talking about? I didn't do anything." And they keep being like, "Oh, we own you. You're ours. Blah, blah, blah." Will tells her, like, "We trusted you. How could you do this to us?" And she fires back, like, "I trusted you too. And look what you did to me." And Michael doesn't know what she's talking about with the whole trust breaking. Rika finally just tells these men off. And she says, quote, "You served 3 years. Well, I'm not sorry for you. You guys screwed up. But surprise, surprise, you actually had to pay a consequence for once. You never had to own up to anything. There's no one to blame but yourselves." So we finally now, thank goodness, I told you it would take forever. We finally get clarity into what sent them to jail. Basically, the burner phone that they used to record all of their Devil's Night pranks got into the hands of the wrong person, and they leaked all of the videos. So we know that Damon got sent to jail for what he did to the mayor's daughter, but we find out that Kai and Will got sent to jail because they beat a cop almost to death. But basically right after the videos were leaked, the police showed up at all of their houses. And since Michael's face was not in any of the videos, Michael got off. Kai accuses Rika of throwing them under the bus that night. She spent with all of them 3 years ago because Michael was mean to her, but she still has no idea what they're talking about. Will then threatens Rika's mother, and she flips out and shoves him so hard that he falls down to the floor. She then gets on top of him and just starts wailing punches down onto his face. It's great. It's great to see after all the stuff that they've done to her that she stabs one of them and then just starts beating the other one up. Michael gets Rika off of Will and realizes that Rika takes a reflexive step away from Michael because she thinks that he will hurt her. And he realizes that he really can't do all of this and he doesn't want to hurt her in any way after all. Still thinking that she did what he thinks that she did. Will gets up off the floor after Rika punches him in the face a bunch and he tries to kind of like go at Rika, but Michael blocks his way. So Michael is turning on his friends for Rika. When we get this reveal, are you ready? Quote, "You're choosing her?" Kai charged. "After everything? She'll screw you over just like us. We trusted her." "You trusted me?" Rika burst out, coming around and holding their eyes. "I was your friend? Do you normally kidnap your friends against their will and drive them out to the middle of nowhere for a little fun?" Okay, so 3 years ago, in Rika's POV, we're going to find out what she was referring to when she said that she got kidnapped and driven out into the middle of the woods. After Rika and Michael get into that big argument where he basically says that he wants her to wait for him to go off and do whatever he wants in college while she waits to turn 18, They both like go their separate ways, and she's obviously heartbroken because of their exchange, and she just wants to go home. So when Rika went to the diner to go and get revenge on Miles and Astrid, she took her sweatshirt off and she was just in a tank top. So she's trying to just like walk home, I guess, at this point. And so she goes and she picks up what she thinks is her sweatshirt, and she realizes that she must have put on Will's sweatshirt by mistake. She reaches inside the pocket and she figures out it's Will's sweatshirt because she reaches inside the pocket and she feels the burner phone. Rika knows that she has the burner phone, and knowing this, she thinks to herself, quote, "He'd be lucky if I didn't toss his damn phone. All their memories in the trash." So Rika has a burner phone with horrible videos that could get them all sent to jail. And the worst thing she thinks about doing is throwing it in the trash. So that should say a lot about her motives here. So Rika attempts to walk home, and as she's trying to walk home, a car pulls up next to her, and she realizes that it's Michael's car, except Michael is not the person driving the car. It's actually Damon driving the car, and Damon doesn't have a mask on, so she can see that's Damon. And then in the passenger seat next to Damon is Kai, and she can tell that it's Kai because he has like his special mask on. Then Will is also in the car, and he's like blacked out, basically slumped asleep in the back. So Damon tells Rika to get in because Michael told them to make sure that she gets home safe. Rika eventually reluctantly does get in the car. As Damon is going on this weird villain rant about how he can tell that Rika and Michael have like a mutual pining for each other, and he just is starting to get progressively angrier and scarier, Rika looks out her window, and to her horror, she sees Damon just fly right past her house. So he's like speeding down the road, and he just blows past her house. Rika starts getting scared, obviously, and asks Kai why they didn't stop, and Kai does not answer. Damon then drives towards the abandoned house from the beginning of the book, you know, the one that they lit on fire. And he starts to get more and more irate at her and starts threatening her. Rika attempts to escape the car, but the doors are locked. Damon eventually gets out of the car and opens her car door to pull her out. The entire time that this is happening, Will is still passed out asleep in the back, and then Kai has just been sitting in the passenger seat with his mask on, saying nothing. Damon gets out of the car and pulls Rika out of the car. So now Damon and Kai with his mask on are out of the car with Rika, and Will is passed out in the back. Damon is like, they are trying to scare her into thinking that they'll do something like really bad to her, if you know what I'm kind of insinuating. And so they're kind of like scuffling it on the ground, like she's trying to get away from that. In the chaos, the burner phone flies out of Rika's pocket. So Rika tries to get the burner phone back and crawl towards it, but Kai overpowers her. And this whole time, obviously, Damon is horrible, and he's like threatening her and scaring her, but he hasn't directly hurt her at this point physically. But Kai, masked up Kai, when Rika is struggling to try to get the burner phone, Kai overpowers her, and then he starts to get super aggressive with her, like it seems like he's going to really hurt her. And until Damon, of all people, calls Kai off. So Damon then tells Rika that they weren't actually going to hurt her. They just wanted her to know that they could. Damon then goes in on her and tells her to stop following the horseman around like a pathetic dog. That is the exact words that he uses. So eventually, after Damon calls Kai off and tells Rika that they just wanted her to know that they could hurt her, they let her go, and she walks back home and just cries the whole way home. I hate that guy. All right, so Flashback over. We're back into present day when Rika kind of drops this bomb of information on Will and Michael. After this whole story, Kai actually accuses Rika of lying, and Michael corroborates his story, telling Rika that Kai was with him when she got picked up with Damon. Because remember, Damon didn't have his mask on, but Kai had his mask on the entire time. Will, of course, ever helpful, doesn't remember anything because he was blacked out and asleep in the back. Damon also denies having done this because these two are already denying it. So he's like, who's gonna believe her? I can just bandwagon with them and nobody will believe her. We're 71% through the book, people. Michael, finally, 71% through the book, reveals to Rika why they've been tormenting her this whole time. He tells Rika to admit that she leaked the videos that sent them to prison. And she's obviously like, what are you talking about? I didn't do that. I don't know what you're referring to, bestie. She's like, what are you talking about? I didn't leak those videos. And then it all hits her. All of those comments they made about her breaking their trust, about how she owes them, about how like she was one of them until she did something terrible. So she finally realizes that they obviously blame her for leaking the videos that got them sent to prison, because the horsemen are like, you had Will's sweatshirt on and Will had the burner phone and just admit it. Rika's like, yeah, I did have the phone until it fell out of my pocket because I was getting shoved to the ground and I was trying to fight these two grown men off of me. They keep arguing back and forth about whether or not she had the phone, and Rika is getting really frustrated with the fact that they are telling her that Kai wasn't in the car. And I think we're all getting really frustrated with the fact that they're telling her that Kai wasn't in the car. So they're all arguing about whether or not Kai was in the car, and then this conversation takes place, okay? Rika says, he was. You all were, except Michael. You were passed out in the car. Damon was threatening me, and Kai grabbed me. When I hit him, he just laughed and said, you can't hurt me. The devil always has my back. You were all there, and the phone fell out when I was on the ground. The devil always has my back, Kai repeated, looking confused. I didn't say that. I've never even heard that before. Rika shakes her head, closing her eyes in despair. I have. Everyone stilled and turned their eyes on Michael. My father, he said, almost in a whisper, looking uneasy. He says that. So, who, when they were attacking Rika, would say, the devil always has my back? Who was behind the Kai mask in the car? It was Trevor. Trevor was the one that attacked her. With this information, with the devil always has my back truth bomb dropped, Michael immediately turns on Damon when he realizes that Damon was dead sober when he took Rika into the woods. So he knew that it was Trevor under the Kai mask the entire time. So backed into a corner, Damon does reveal that after Michael and Kai left, when they were gone, Trevor showed up to the party looking for Rika, and then Trevor and Damon had a conversation. They both had a mutual interest in getting Rika away from the horsemen, and they agreed to mess with her to scare her off. Rika is like, dude, why would you do that to me? And Damon tells her that women always mess things up, and that Michael was smitten with her, and that Kai was starting to notice her too. And Kai is just like, he's like, yeah, Michael has a huge crush on you, and Kai is starting to notice you too. And he's saying this in front of everyone. And so Michael, Rika, and Kai are all standing there while Damon's like, yeah, Kai thinks you're hot too. Damon tells Rika that women are for one thing and nothing else, which makes Michael launch at him and punch Damon in the face. Thank God. And Damon just swallows the punch and just keeps going. Just psychopath behavior. He just lets himself just get absolutely punched in the face and just continues his villain rant again. He does admit to what they did in the woods, and they all put together that Trevor, must have been the one that got the freaking burner phone the whole time. You know how you could have fixed this problem? I'm talking to you, Michael, and Horseman, mostly Michael. You know how you could have fixed this problem, babe? Maybe if you would have asked her 3 years ago if she had the burner phone. He does admit to what they did in the woods, and they put together the fact that Trevor must have been the one to get a hold of the phone after Rika lost it in the fight. So he starts to realize that all the guys are turning against him in believing Rika, and Damon snaps. He goes for Rika, but Michael gets to him first, and Michael just starts beating Damon up. All the while, Damon is yelling, like, you're choosing her over us. And you can just tell, like, he has just such insane jealousy problems. So at this point, Michael is beating up Damon. Damon is screaming at the Horseman, and Rika has just absolutely had enough. And Michael tells her that they can't let her leave, but that they won't hurt her, which is just a joke coming from him after all that they did to just literally ruin her entire life. Rika goes back into the house eventually and witnesses Michael obviously kicking Damon out. Kai and Will are still processing the fact that Trevor is actually the one that sent them to jail. But in the grand scheme of things, it's really not surprising at all, because throughout the book, we've been getting breadcrumbs about the fact that Trevor despises his brother. He's super territorial over Rika. He hates the rest of the Horsemen. So him doing something like this is not surprising at all. If they used one brain cell, if they used the one brain cell that the four of them share, they probably could have figured out that Trevor did that. And Rika looks over at Michael, who's also processing the fact that his brother is the one that sent his friends to jail. And Rika says to him, quote, yeah, it must be a bitch to realize you wasted 3 years hating the wrong person. So this really just kind of, I think, sums up the book so well. So Michael finally comes clean about everything that they've been doing. So here's our info dump about the plot to ruin Rika's life. Where's Rika's mother? She's been in rehab this whole time. Why hasn't she been able to get a hold of anyone on her phone? Remember how she was like, she lost all of her money and she was like, this is just a rant video now. Remember how she lost all of her money and she was at the ATM and she was calling everyone in her life and no one would answer, and the fact that her mom never picked up her phone the million times Rika tried to call her? Why is that? Because the Horsemen stole her phone months ago and changed all of the numbers in it to go to a burner phone, so she's literally been calling no one. That's diabolical. Will then says, quote, we were so sure it was you. I woke up, I saw the videos online, and I panicked, realizing I'd left the phone in my sweatshirt at the warehouse. He could barely look at me. And then Michael saw the sweatshirt hanging on a kitchen chair in the next morning, and we finally figured out through Damon that you'd worn it home. You were mad at Michael, feeling rejected, so we just... He trailed off, the rest not needing to be said. Rika glared at Michael. She thinks to herself, all this time, all these years, he could have confronted me. But that was him, I guess. I'm literally going to explode. This makes me so angry. That was him, I guess. He pushed forward no matter who it hurt, always believing he was right and never apologizing. At least I could see the regret in Kai and Will's eyes. With Michael, nothing. The more mistakes he made, the taller he tried to stand. So no one could see over him. So no one could see anyone but him. That is... Rika just wants to leave, but Michael won't let her, so she goes and locks herself in her bedroom at the Christ house. So later that night, Rika is in her room contemplating on how she can get out of the house. She goes to leave and realizes that after this whole thing went down, after she stabs Damon, finds out that it was Trevor that sent them all to jail, they all get this huge bomb dropped on them. What do? What do the Horsemen decide to do after realizing they ruined the wrong person's life? What do you think they do? was your guess to throw a giant party? So, yeah, she finds out after all of that, the horseman's great idea, after traumatizing this innocent woman, is to throw a giant rager in the Christ house. Rika, obviously, is pissed, and so she charges into the Christ's indoor basketball court. We get one more appearance from the basketball court, thank God. And she goes in there to find Michael. She finds all three of the horsemen chilling there because, remember, Damon just got ousted. And she goes up to them and she's like, you guys drained my bank account. You kidnapped my mother. You burned my house down. And now, after ruining my life, you decide to have a party? And Will is like, well, we're really sorry. So she threatens the horsemen, telling them that she knows where Trevor's safe is. She knows the combo, and she thinks that he'll probably still have that phone hidden in there. She tells the horsemen that she'll give them the combination to Trevor's safe if they do what she wants. Michael agrees to give her her house, money, and her mother back. What a lovely guy. So Rika goes to leave and expects that Will and Kai will laugh and jeer and do whatever they've always been doing. But all they do is just kind of stare at the floor in sullen silence. So other than the fact that Michael refuses to own up to his egregious mistakes, the two of them are at least showing remorse. They feel bad, which I guess is a lot to ask for from these four people. That only half of them feel bad. It seems like not enough, but okay, we'll take what we can get, I guess. Rika goes back up to her room and just sits in the darkness trying to process everything. And then she gets a knock at her bedroom door. Who's knocking at her door? It's Kai. Kai is at Rika's bedroom door. Interesting. Rika lets Kai in, and even though she's not really in the mood to talk to anyone right now, she does open the door a crack, and she sees him standing there looking all regretful and sad. And Kai asks her if she's okay, and she's like, no, obviously. Kai then tells her, quote, I wanted to hurt you because I thought you hurt me, and now I know that that's not true. Rika asks, so does that make everything all right? The stress and the fear you put on me? No, he rushed out. He dropped his head, looking like he was struggling to find the words. He looked weary. I just don't even know who I am anymore. With that admittance, Rika decides to open up the door. Kai then tells Rika that they should have made Michael confront her the night that they suspected she stole the phone and leaked the videos, and that he feels terrible about all the things that they took from her. Kai and Rika have a nice little heart-to-heart when Kai admits how much prison changed him. After seeing him open up and be vulnerable, Rika is curious, and he's like getting really emotional about his prison trauma. And he says to her, quote, Damon lost what little heart he had. People, problems, they barely scratch the surface with him anymore. He doesn't care about anything. Will finds a way to cope with alcohol and other things. And as for me, I don't want to be around anyone other than the guys. Not even my family. They won't understand. Understand what? His chest shook with a bitter laugh. I wish I knew, Rika. I just can't let anyone in. I haven't touched a woman in 3 years. Michael paid off guards to keep us safe, but he couldn't shield us from everything. He watched as Will deteriorated, and I withdrew more and more. He was helpless to do anything, and he felt so guilty. Guilty because he thought he'd incited you. Guilty because he was free. He came up with the plan, something to keep us hot and angry, something to keep us fighting. And before we knew it, it consumed our every waking moment in there. So Kai, after admitting all that, he tells Rika he's so sorry, and he, finally looking at her in the eyes. And they have, a weird little moment together. So Michael walks into them having this little moment with Rika knelt before Kai and her holding his face in her hands. It's super awkward, and Michael and Rika immediately start bickering, and this just earns a little chuckle from Kai, and he gets up and he leaves the room. Rika tells Michael that she doesn't want to see him, but Michael is like, babe, I would have never let them hurt you. What do you mean? When you were getting attacked, like, I chose you over my friends. Like, when they were gonna beat you up, like, I made sure they didn't kill you. So then Michael and Rika are, like, doing their, like, push and pull games together. And during these games, because Alex is at the party, I know you're like, what are you talking about? Alex is at the party, and when Michael and Rika are playing their weird head games with each other, Rika almost sleeps with Alex, which I was like, please. Unfortunately, they do not. And their mind games turn into Rika and Michael sleep together again. The next day, Michael just thinks about how much he botched this whole situation. That this was never Rika's fault and that he should have asked her about the phone the day of. No shit, Michael. But they have a bigger problem now, and that problem is Trevor. So Michael goes downstairs and he finds Kai and Will downstairs in the house. Rika then comes down shortly after, and Kai immediately is like, "Hi, Rika, would you like some breakfast?" Which pisses Michael off and gives me so much joy. So Rika demands to know the status of her mother. Michael gives her the phone number to contact the rehab finally. Will doesn't waste any time getting back to making a plan on how to get revenge on Trevor. But Michael is like, well, we can't kill him. He's my brother. Okay, we're still in present day. We're flipping back to Rika's POV. Back in Rika's POV, Michael is really trying to get into her good graces again. And she's not really having it until Michael tells her that he's bringing her to their fancy gentleman's club so that she can go to an open fencing night. And they're going to make her look like she's like a man because it's a gentleman's sports club. Kai is also at the club for fencing night and realizes that Rika is pretending to be a man so that she can fence in the club. Rika fences and beats her opponent and is just really feeling happy and in her element. So after fencing... I don't want to have to explain this part. After fencing, Rika goes into the locker room to shower. Michael follows her in there and they start to do stuff. And Rika tells Michael that she loves him. And Michael's kind of stammering for words. And he's like, I can't move. Until a voice says, tell her you love her. Jesus Christ. And obviously the person that's saying that is Kai. Kai is in there in the locker room watching this whole interaction, because remember, he did that in the grotto too. He was there when Michael and Rika did stuff. I once again am not going to be getting into the details, especially for this scene, because it's a lot. Reader's discretion advised for this part. But long story short, Kai, Rika, and Michael sleep together. If you'd like to know the logistics of that interaction, I encourage you to read the book. Sorry. Rika then doubles down after this, telling Michael that she loves him again. But shockingly, I know you guys will be surprised, Michael doesn't say it back. Okay, so the next chapter is basically Michael trying to get a hold of Rika after all this stuff goes down and she's just avoiding his calls. Kai comes and finds Rika at college because she won't answer Michael's calls. Kai eventually gets Rika to come with him so Kai and Will can escort her back to her apartment. She doesn't get why they need to do this, and they tell her that Trevor is still out there, and now that they know the truth about him and how dangerous he is, they need to really be careful. That night, Rika gets woken up from a sound in the hallway, and she checks her phone and sees a text from Michael telling her to open the door for him when he gets there. Rika goes into the kitchen to make something to eat, but notices in the corner of her eye that the back door leading to the emergency stairwell from her apartment is wide open. And not only is it wide open, there's a man standing there in the dark, open doorway to her back stairwell. And remember from the beginning of the book, the back stairwell is never used. You can't get in. It's an emergency exit. Since she got this text from Michael, Rika assumes that that's him, creepily leering at her from the emergency exit dark stairwell with a hood over his face. It's not Michael, obviously. Who is it? You have a choice between two people. It's Damon. So he broke into her apartment. Damon then chloroforms her and knocks her out. Also, I just want you to, disclaimer, buckle your seatbelts for the rest of this story, people. You thought it was crazy before. You ain't seen nothing yet. Buckle up, okay? So Rika wakes up in a bed on the Christ's, yacht. She's tied to a bed on the Christ's yacht. Damon then comes in, and we learn that after being stabbed by Rika, Damon joined forces again with Trevor, so they're in cahoots. The two worst people in the world are working together again. No. Damon has Rika tied to the bed so that she can't escape, and he tells her that Michael will be here soon. Rika then tries to get through to Damon by telling him that if he does this, his friends will never forgive him. Damon tells her it's too late and nothing will ever be the same. So even though Damon is working with Trevor, he's still going to kill him when all this is over. Trevor comes into the room shortly after and tells Rika not to bother trying to get Damon to save her because Damon hates women. We all know this. Trevor then drops this bomb that Damon was abused by his mother starting at the age of 12. Rika then asks Trevor why he's doing all of this, and Trevor tells her that he just wants to see Michael and her suffer. He tells Trevor that Michael owns everything she once owned and that she could never be near him again. So what is he going to do with her now? Trevor tells her, quote, "You think I want you back? Oh no, I can do so much better than you. And as for Michael having everything, that's easy. The dead don't own property." As Rika starts putting the puzzle together, they hear a motorboat approaching the yacht, and we can assume that it's Michael coming to rescue her. Trevor then tells Rika, quote, "It's midnight, baby. By 12:05, you'll both be on your way to the bottom of the ocean." We're switching back to Michael's POV. I know, stay with me. This is crazy. And he's in the speedboat coming to rescue Rika. Will and Kai are also in the boat with Michael. Michael then boards the yacht, worried sick about Rika, and he finds her tied up, using a shard of broken mirror to cut at the ropes binding her wrists. Rika then warns Michael that Trevor and Damon know that they're coming and to go back out to the boat to help Will and Kai. Michael frees Rika, but her hands are still bound. They go to find his friends and quickly discover Damon standing over Kai, who is now beaten and bloodied. Michael glances back at the boat and sees that Will is also missing from the speedboat and that he must be somewhere on the yacht. Michael then notices Trevor standing near the edge of the yacht, looking amused. He motions for Michael to come over to where he's standing, and when he does, he sees something terrible. When Michael goes over there and he peers over the edge of the yacht, he sees Will in the water. So Michael looks over the edge and sees Will in the water and sees that Trevor had bound Will's wrists together so that he couldn't swim. He also, that's not even the worst part. He also looks into the water and he sees like a rope attached to Will's feet, and he follows the rope back up onto the boat and sees that the rope is attached to a giant stack of bricks. When he sees all these bricks, he realizes that Trevor is gonna kick the bricks off and send Will plunging into the bottom of the ocean. Trevor now gets his villain monologue and he starts laying out his evil plan. So he basically tells Michael that he's gonna kill his friends, the horsemen, and then he's gonna kill the girl he loves, and all the while he's gonna make Michael watch. And then Trevor's just gonna kill Michael last. So Trevor's gonna kill everyone on the boat. Okay. As Trevor is doing his villain monologue, he doesn't realize that Rika, who has been standing behind Michael this whole time, reaches under Michael's shirt to hand him the gun that he had hidden there. So Michael brought a gun. So then Michael takes the gun secretly as Trevor continues to yap. I should also mention, I forgot to say, that Trevor also has a gun. Obviously, of course he does. So now Michael secretly has a gun. Trevor openly has a gun. Trevor does not know that Michael has a gun. So Damon and then Trevor also agrees. They're now letting Michael allegedly choose between saving Kai and Will and saving Rika. Okay, so they're like, pick right now. We'll throw one of them. We'll throw one group into the water and drown them. The other one can live. Okay, so everything happens really fast after this. So Trevor's like, I'm doing all this to you because I wanted to see you suffer knowing that you can't save everyone. So then all this stuff happens in like a moment. So Trevor then pushes Will's bricks off of the boat deck, sending him plunging into the ocean. And as Trevor does this, Michael starts sprinting at him and shoots at him 3 times. So Michael dives into the water after Will and does manage to free him from the bricks. And Michael and Will both swim up safely to the surface. So Michael then, after saving Will, is frantically swimming back to the boat to go and try to save Rika. But he's too late. He sees Trevor push the bricks that are also tied to her ankle, off of the boat, and she gets flung into the ocean and immediately starts sinking as well. After frantically searching some more, Michael does find her, and he sees her swimming back up to the surface. She freed herself with the mirror shard because she's a resourceful queen. Michael, Will, and Rika do make it back up onto the deck of the yacht, and then Kai tells them that as all this commotion was going down, Damon took their speedboat and fled. So he saw how things were going for him, and he just said, you know what? Not for me. After they verify that everybody's okay and that nobody's hurt, that's when they notice Trevor. So remember when Michael fired those 3 shots at Trevor? Well, one of those shots hit Trevor right in the chest. So he is bleeding out on the deck of the yacht. So Trevor then starts to beg Michael. He's getting desperate at this point. He's begging Michael to take him to shore, to let him go to the hospital because they're family, they're brothers. Michael thinks to himself, quote, I might not have been able to choose between Rika's life and the lives of my friends, but I had no trouble choosing between them and my brother. Raising my foot, I planted my shoe on his shoulder and shoved. He grunted and grappled for my leg, fear rounding his eyes before he rolled and fell into the pool, his arms flailing as he sunk lower and lower. He tried to struggle, tried to grab at the water like it was a wall he could climb, but only his eyes broke the surface as he drifted to the bottom, peering up at us, seeing his only hope, only feet away, not coming for him. So, heavy stuff. Michael, to recap, Michael shoots at Trevor when he pushes Will over the edge. And one of the bullets hits Trevor. And so Trevor was bleeding out, begged Michael to save his life. And Michael just took his foot and nudged Trevor over the edge of the yacht into the ocean. And Trevor sunk into the ocean. So Trevor is dead. I'm going to take his picture off because he's no longer with us. RIP. Okay, so after all this happens, Michael then brings Rika into one of the rooms of the yacht and begins like fussing over her, making sure she's okay because he's so freaked out over the fact that she almost drowned. He finally tells her that he loves her and that he's always known that he loved her. All it took was for her to get thrown into the ocean, weighed down by a bunch of bricks, for him to finally admit it, but he did. So, good job, I guess. This is the end, you guys. We made it. 3 weeks later, Rika and Michael are back home in Thunder Bay, celebrating Thanksgiving with their families. Rika's mother is back from rehab, and she's doing really well. Rika and Michael are happily in love. And after their Thanksgiving dinner, Michael takes Rika to that like abandoned St. Killian's castle. He tells her that he bought it for them to refurbish into a home. He then proposes to her and she says yes, and they're very happy. We also find out that Damon has fled to Russia. And putting my notes down, folks, we made it to the end. Thank you guys so much for watching, and let me know if you want to hear about book 2. Thanks.